In my opinion, this is about as close to throwing away money as you can get. Everything that can break will break, it's only a matter of time. For the average person considering this exact situation, I would typically recommend that they... Welcome back. Today, we're going to be settling this debate once and for all. Is it better to buy a house or is it better to rent a house? If you've been following the news lately, you'll notice mortgage rates are dropping new lows, making monthly payments on mortgages more affordable. On the other hand, home prices are hitting new highs, making homes less affordable. On top of all of this, we have a housing shortage that is far from over, which has probably got you wondering, given everything that's going on right now, is it better to buy or rent? Well, in this video, we're going to answer that by looking at a side-by-side comparison and diving into the numbers between buying a home and renting a home. And make sure to stick around to the end of the video because I promise the answer is probably a lot different than what you might be expecting. Before we dive in, if you find this information helpful, all that I ask is that you buy me a like or rent the subscribe button. As much as I love making these videos, they do take a lot of time and nothing keeps me going like validation from random strangers on the internet. Speaking of strangers on the internet, I feel like 99% of the time when this topic comes up, the knee-jerk response is that renting is just throwing away money and you need to invest in a property as soon as you can to start building wealth. The only issue is that virtually everyone that says this hasn't actually sat down and compared the numbers side by side. And even if they have compared the numbers at some point in time, they may not have considered all the factors, and the housing market has probably changed a lot since then. So let's get started with the numbers on buying a home. When it comes to buying a house, there are a lot of costs involved. Many people will go to Zillow.com and look at what the estimated mortgage payment will be and then just call it a day. It can then be tempting to compare this monthly mortgage payment to similar properties' monthly rent payments and think, aha, see? Buying is better than renting, or renting is better than buying. But once we dig a little bit deeper, you'll see that that isn't the whole story. First, let's talk about what it's going to cost you up front, starting with the down payment, which is something you're not going to need when you're renting a house. While FHA loans allow qualified first-time buyers with a minimum credit score of 580 to get away with a down payment of 3.5%, most buyers are going to want to fork over somewhere between 10 and 20% of the purchase price of the home. In today's market, with a median house price of $412,000, that's a down payment of anywhere between $40,000 to $80,000. Next, we have closing costs, and in my opinion, this is about as close to throwing away money as you can get. The amount you'll have to pay varies by state, but you'll typically expect to pay somewhere between 2 and 5% of the total amount you're borrowing. Now, on a median house price of $412,000, this will come out to somewhere between $8,000 and $20,000. This money will go to cover a long list of fees, including application fees, appraisal, home inspection, origination, underwriting, title insurance and title search, and transfer tax. In total, your upfront costs on a $412,000 home are going to be between $48,000 and $100,000. Now that we have the upfront costs, it's time to go over the recurring costs of buying a house, starting with the mortgage payment. This is going to be your biggest monthly expense, and it's going to depend on a variety of factors, such as how much money you put down, what your credit score is, and what market interest rates are. Assuming you have a good credit score and get an FHA loan at 6.7% interest, you'll be paying between $2,134 and $2,401, depending on whether you put down 10% or 20%. If these payments seem a little low to you, that's because they don't include taxes and insurance. And speaking of taxes, let's talk about property taxes. This also varies by state, and it spans a wide range from as low as 0.5% in Hawaii to 2.5% in New Jersey. For this example, we're going to use California's property tax rate at 0.76%, which translates to another $261 per month, bringing our monthly total to a range of $2,395 to $2,662 per month. Next up is insurance, and there are two kinds: homeowner's insurance and PMI, which stands for private mortgage insurance. In almost every case, mortgage lenders will require you to take out home insurance, which covers things like vandalism and natural disasters.
Me and Eric are about to go vandalize some stuff.
Hi, sure about this?
Yeah, man, just go, hurry.
According to Bankrate, the average cost of homeowners insurance is about $119 per month. PMI, on the other hand, is another layer of protection that mortgage companies require you to have if you're going to put less than 20% down on the loan. The rationale is that if you don't have 20% to put down on a loan, you're a little bit more likely to fall behind on your payments, and the lender wants you to pay the insurance premiums to protect them in the event that you miss your payment. Luckily, NerdWallet has a nice little calculator that takes our median home value assumptions and says that PMI is going to cost another $244 if we're only putting 10% down. This brings our new monthly cost range to $2,758 at 10% down and $2,781 at 20% down. Now in this video, we're going to be ignoring HOA fees because those aren't standard for all communities, so we're going to move on to last but not least, maintenance. Anyone who hasn't purchased a home will be like, what do you mean maintenance? I'm buying this house brand new. There's nothing to fix. Stop. Just stop it.
Stop it. Get some help.
Listen, it's just one of the things you learn when you buy a house. Everything that can break will break. It's only a matter of time. Somehow, the house just finds a way to cost like $3 to $5 grand a year on random things that need fixing, things you didn't even know existed before you owned a home. So for this exercise, we're going to budget 1% of the home value per year or $343 per month for maintenance, bringing our final total monthly costs of buying a median priced home to a range of $3,101 at 10% down to $3,124 at 20% down. But wait, there's more. As we go through these numbers, it's important to remember that not all of this monthly payment is expenses. Thanks to this calculator from Bankrate, we can plug in our assumptions of a 20% down payment on a median price home of $412,000 and see that our principal payment over the course of the first year is about $290 per month. And with a 10% down payment, that comes out to about $330 per month. This is essentially money that you're forced to invest in your home, and it's not really a cost, so we'll hold on to these numbers for later on. Now, as a homeowner, you can technically deduct your mortgage interest on your taxes, but the amount you can save depends widely on your individual tax rate, and if you don't currently itemize your tax return, it's not likely that you're going to save any additional money by deducting your mortgage expense. And in my experience, most folks buying their first home in this price range aren't itemizing their tax returns, so we're going to leave this one out as well. So this brings our total monthly cost of buying a home to a range of $3,101 at putting 10% down and $3,124 if you're putting 20% down. Now, on the one hand, it would be tempting to take this number and compare what it would cost to rent similar homes and then see that it costs less to rent a home. But that's not quite the full story. Before we start comparing the two, let's just talk about renting for a second. When it comes to monthly costs, this one's pretty easy. It's just your rent. Depending on the landlord, there may be some nuance where certain utility or other expenses are included or not. But in this video, we're going to assume that whatever your monthly utilities are for renting a home are going to be roughly the same as what your monthly utilities will be when buying a house. According to rent.com, the average rent in the United States is $1,967. But after doing some poking around on Zillow, I think the average here is dragged down by outliers and isn't apples to apples with the median house price we're anchoring on, so I'm going to bump that up to $2,400. Renting also involves a security deposit, which is a chunk of money you give to the landlord up front that they're supposed to give you back when you move out, minus any expenses to repair any damages you may have caused while living in the unit. Security deposits are usually between 1 month and 2.5 months of rent. So for this exercise, we're going to assume that if you're renting this house, your security deposit up front is going to be about 2 months of rent. Now that we've outlined all the costs of buying and renting a home in today's market, it's time to look at the numbers and the side-by-side comparison between buying and renting a home. Now, before we take a peek, the biggest factor between these two options is going to be assumptions around opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the cost associated with picking one option over another. For example, if you spend $35,000 on a Tesla, there's an opportunity cost involved because you could have invested that money into Tesla stock and become a millionaire. The same is true with buying a house versus renting a house. To make this clear, I've come up with a little spreadsheet to compare our two options. In option 1, we're going to assume that we happen to save and make the perfect amount of money every month to pay for a 10% down payment and the total monthly expenses we calculated earlier. This means we won't have any money left over to invest in the stock market, and any equity we build up in the home will grow at 5% per year. In option 2, we're going to take the same person and let them rent a comparable home. Any money they saved by not buying a home will be invested in the stock market, which is going to grow at 7% every year. Now, before I show you the results, I want you to try and predict. Which option do you think is going to come out ahead? Do you think the buyer will have a higher net worth because they're able to put equity in their property, which will appreciate at 5% per year? Or do you think the renter will have a higher net worth because they are able to save some money and invest that into the stock market at 7% per year? Are you ready? Let's take a look. As you can see on this chart here, renting a house under these assumptions will bring you out ahead within the first year, and that gap will widen over time. But if we're being honest here, there really isn't much of a difference between the two. Over the course of 30 years, renting will only get you ahead by around $50,000 or about $4 to $5 a day. This changes, of course, on two major assumptions: house price appreciation and stock market returns. If we assume the stock market is only going to go up by a modest 5% annually over the next 30 years, then buying is the better option. If we assume home prices will only rise by 3% per year, then renting is going to be the better option. The takeaway here is that buying versus renting isn't as black and white as some might want you to think. And if we're being honest, in both scenarios, your net worth goes up materially over time. But you came to this video for a hard and fast answer, and I'm going to give you one. For the average person considering this exact situation, I would typically recommend that they buy and not rent, provided that it's within their budget and they are living within their means. Remember, the reason the renter looks a little bit better in this scenario is because we are assuming that the renter takes all of the money that they would have otherwise saved in buying a home and invests that into the stock market and gets a really good return. In my experience, however, renters don't always behave this way. Not everyone has a big nest egg that they can otherwise go invest in the stock market, and definitely not everyone is considering what they're paying for rent versus what they could be paying for a mortgage, taking that difference and investing that all into the stock market. And in that case, renting becomes a terrible option. Now you might be thinking, I'm not the average person, my situation is totally different. And I totally get it, which is why you can download this spreadsheet for free at the link in the comments below and input your own assumptions for your own situation. Now, in case you missed everything or you just skipped to this section to hear the punchline, here's everything you need to know. If you have 20% to put down on a house and you have good credit, then it all comes down to what you think the stock market and housing prices are going to do in the future. If you think the market is going to go up 7% or more over the long term, then it might be a good idea to take that down payment and your monthly savings by paying a lower rent and invest that into the stock market at 7% per year. If you think the stock market won't do that well, or if you think house prices will go up more than the stock market over time, then go ahead and invest in buying a home. On the other hand, if you don't have 20% to put down on a home and you won't save much more money by renting versus buying, then you should still consider buying a home instead of renting a home. This way, your mortgage will act as a forced savings and investment account and will get you exposure and build your net worth over time through real estate. With that said, thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this content, please let me know by renting the like button or buying the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.